Middle call! Baby, hey!
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Haberman and Middlecoff. I'm Guy. That's John. We have a podcast. If you're watching the YouTube, it's down in the description below. If you're listening to the podcast, check out the YouTube on the YouTube channel and get in the Haberman and Middlecoff mailbag on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a review, 5 stars. Put a question in there. That's how you get in the mailbag.
Stay warm, people.
Get warm?
Stay warm.
Stay warm.
Freezing.
John, as we speak, Joe Douglas, the GM of the Jets, Woody Johnson, the owner of the Jets, Robert Saleh, the head coach of the Jets, Nathaniel Hackett, the cheese in the mousetrap that is the free agent / trade chase of Aaron Rodgers, have probably descended with their private jet upon Chico, wherever Aaron is.
Malibu, better than Chico. All due respect to Chico. And are talking to him. What do you think? Over and done, gone from the NFC? Yeah, I think he's going to be on the Jets by the end of the week. And I think the Packers are no longer viewed. Now, we can't forget the Niners, who have played the Packers back-to-back years in 2019 in the NFC Championship game, and then 2021 in the second round. They didn't make the playoffs last year. They were not a playoff team. The Lions were better than them and are going to be an ascending team. I think they got multiple first-round picks still. So, the Packers are no lock with the way Rodgers played last year to be a playoff team, but, more often than not, he's going to play better than he did last year. I would say it would potentially be in it. The likelihood of Jordan Love being remotely as close to as good as Aaron Rodgers is slim to none. So I think it's fair to say bye-bye Packers from just chalking up. If Aaron Rodgers plays 17 games, more often than not, they're just a playoff lock. You would say those days are done.
Yeah, I mean, there was the period of time at the end of the regular season where it looked like the Packers might make the playoffs. And we started having the conversation. Now, in the end, they, finished 8-9. The last playoff team in was Seattle at 9-8. The Giants were 9-7-1. But we did start having the conversation at the end of the year. What would be the biggest challenge for the Niners? They were the 2 seeds. They played the 7. Would you rather play Seattle? Would you rather play Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay? You'd rather play Geno, who just got extended, I think, through 1 touchdown against the Niners last year, maybe 2, played 3 games. So you would rather have played Geno Smith than Aaron Rodgers because on any given day, a great quarterback could beat you. And I think one thing we've seen with the Niners in this recent era, it takes a great quarterback or a special quarterback to beat them. They are not, by and large, they are not going to lose in meaningful games. They're not going to lose playoff games to average quarterbacks. I think that's how I feel about them. You need to have you got to have a special quarterback to beat them. Aaron was that. Now, if you tell me Jordan Love turns out to be a great player, he does have mobility, which could create a problem for the Niners down the road. But I think what it does, it just puts one more great quarterback or potentially great quarterback in the AFC, where there are already several, if Lamar stays put, fantastic quarterbacks. I mean, there's the potential of 6 like Hall of Fame quarterbacks playing in the AFC playoffs next year, not counting Trevor Lawrence. There's a long way to go. But Mahomes, I would put, Herbert certainly has that potential. Obviously, Mahomes is there, Burrow, Josh Allen, and then Rodgers. So the AFC, whoever comes out of the NFC playoffs and represents the NFC in the Super Bowl, somebody's going to have to go through a gauntlet in the AFC if the Jets get Aaron Rodgers and are a playoff team.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just think it weakens. It does weaken. I mean, the
NFC quarterbacks.
Yeah. I mean, it's fucking Aaron Rodgers. I mean, there's great unknown with Jordan Love. History would tell us more than likely Jordan Love's average at best. That's if he's the 14th best quarterback for the Packers, I think they would sign up for that right now. So if Aaron Rodgers leaves, and maybe Aaron Rodgers is trending down and his run's over. I saw that this would be his 18th year in the league. Like he's been in the NFL a long time. Most of our lives, like an 18-year pro sport career was incredibly long. It feels like, because of technology / diet / the way the league is, officiated, he could have several more years playing at a high level. But yeah, I mean, I think adios. Like he's gone. Like he's not coming back to Green Bay. Like that ship's clearly sailed. Now it's a complicated situation, but I think it just weakens, the NFC as a whole, though short term and just looking at last year, they were not a playoff team. And they really got lucky to be as close as they were. Remember that like Miami Christmas Day game, they were down 10 points and Tua played a second half with a concussion and threw a bunch of picks. I mean, they easily could have been KO'd way earlier than what it came down to on that night game when got thoroughly outplayed by the Lions. Like the Lions are a team. If the Niners played them in the playoffs, everyone would pick the Niners because of like the Jared Goff matchup, but they are a very talented, young and up and coming team. Like they have impact players and now they get several picks. I mean,
remember that game they played really well. It didn't matter to them at that point in time. They already knew they weren't going to make it to the playoffs. So we talked about what would be a worse matchup for the Niners. And I think we thought they would be a worse matchup for the Niners than Seattle, just because they've got a little something to them. The Niners already beaten Seattle. But the Goff factor, I think they cannot check that box of a quarterback that can go toe to toe with the Niners defense. They just can't.
I would look at the Packers as ranking the teams as the worst of the Seattle. Like Geno Smith, Jordan Love's not going to be as good as Geno Smith. Obviously, Jared Goff is better than Jordan Love. I mean, Jared Goff last year was better than like Dak Prescott.
Jordan Love may not be as good as Geno Smith, but he might be. And I know Geno Smith isn't good enough to beat the Niners. Like that to me is the difference between the two, right? Is we have not seen Jordan Love play.
I would say if Jordan Love were to throw 30 touchdowns next year, it'd be one of the biggest stories in the league.
100%. I agree with that. I'm just saying, I already know beyond a shadow of a doubt, Geno Smith's not a good enough quarterback to carry a team to beat the Niners defense.
No, but he is good enough to have you in the playoffs. And you can't say that about Jordan Love.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see if they make the playoffs again. It took a first half that was MVP level from Geno Smith for them to sneak into the playoffs at the end. Like, I don't think
true, but they got picks. But they got their team is going to be more talented.
Yeah. My point is we have the final answer on Geno Smith. We don't have the final answer on Jordan Love. I'm giving Jordan Love.
I wouldn't go. We have the final. Like Geno's just really first starting to get to play. I would rather have Geno Smith than Jordan Love. I know that. Again, could be proven wrong pretty quickly.
32 years old. If he was that guy if he was really that guy, he'd have been that guy by now. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I
think what we saw in the second half of the season was him come back to earth, which is what generally he doesn't mean he's not an NFL starter. I mean, the flip side of what I'm saying is Jordan Love may not be an NFL starter. That's true. He may not be.
I think one problem for the Packers is you never want to be the guy that follows the guy. You want to be the guy that follows the guy that followed the guy. The amount of pressure on Jordan Love is going to be astronomical.
They're trying to catch lightning in a bottle twice.
Yeah.
Is the fact that it worked with Aaron evidence that it will work again, or evidence that they got really lucky and you can't pull that off twice?
And let's face it, in a weird way, Brett Favre was like their Steve Young. They kind of caught lightning in a bottle with him. Remember? They traded for him after his rookie year.
He was so unknown his jersey was spelled wrong. Or was this just his card? Yeah. I know. Rich Eisen, among the rumor dump that he made on Monday, he said that the rumor around the combine was that Tom Brady may not be done after all, according to people he talked to. Folks are saying keep an eye on Miami. Brady responded Tuesday by saying, anyone thinks I have time to come back to the NFL has never adopted a 2-month-old kitten for their daughter. Which is funny, but also I don't believe that somebody can't take care of a kitten for you if you decide to come back to the NFL.
It was a way to get in on the conversation without saying, like, this is stupid, I'm never coming back.
Which is, if you want to end it, the way to end it.
I got a theory on this guy.
Okay, hit me.
There was also a story. Rich was throwing out some nuggets. Now, he's there for 6 days, bullshitting with everybody, right? Throughout that Phillip Rivers, in December, played some calls. Called the Dolphins and called the 49ers. Said, hey, guys, I'm ready if you need me. And then I started putting the piece of the puzzle together. It's either the Dolphins or the Niners that are telling Rich this. And there were also some rumors about keep an eye on Brady, Miami. Those would be 2 teams that would be very interested in Tom. And obviously they would have to tell someone that, like, Phillip Rivers, Phillip ain't broadcasting this. If it is the 49ers, I think they're trying to hint at, we're not done trying to get a hold of this guy. And ultimately, it doesn't matter because we're going to stay with this. And if it is up until training camp, we're cool with it. But this is not, we can publicly say we're not interested, because Phillip Rivers doesn't make sense for the 49ers. He can't move at all. And obviously, he was trending down that last year in Indy, and that's several years ago. Tom, who I also don't think is a great scheme fit because he can't move either, would be worth it, especially if Purdy is compromised. But I think the 49ers are not going to stop with the contact of him. I would imagine that's a fluid situation, 100% behind the scenes, not getting leaked out, because I think Tom now is very sensitive, again, in his way of like, he tried to poo-poo it, end it, but I think Kyle and John, and probably the Dolphins too, and that includes the owner, probably the owner more than the, like, I don't figure Mike McDaniel's calling him a lot, but I would imagine the Dolphins owner, Stephen Ross, and John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan are constantly just throwing some things out there to old Thomas. We know John has his number because he admitted to sending him like, happy career.
Well, but when he said it, it was kind of, he seemed like he did not feel totally free to just talk about that subject. And there was something awkward about the way he talked about it. I'd have to go back and watch again, but if I recall, he didn't say Brady's name. There was something that just felt a little off to me about the way Lynch said it. I sent him a text when he retired. He was a teammate for about 3 weeks. So I just sent him a text saying, congratulations to one of the best careers. I wished him the best. So we'll leave it at that. I thought when I watched it, Lynch was omitting something. I'm not going to say hiding something, but I thought John Lynch was careful with his words. Partly maybe it's because he doesn't want to say something that will get people believing that he's talking to Tom about returning. But again, that's an easy thing to shoot down if it's not a thing that you're talking about.
I think it's a very sensitive subject when there's truth behind it. Especially from this, their perspective too is a little more unique than just GM player. He's, fellow Hall of Famer. I just think that it's a very sensitive topic with John for all the different variables. One, yes, they're interested. Obviously, there's some desperation on their part. And two, I think John is I think he's very cautious with this type of stuff to begin with, at the highest level.
The question is why, right? And your point is, I think you're right, there's a reason to be cautious. If there were no doubt about retirement, there would be no reason to be cautious.
Yeah. Like if this was 3 years, if you asked him the same question about Peyton Manning, I don't think he'd beat around the bush like that. And as we've seen with all the memes, and you and I have been talking about this forever, who else? I think Kevin Durant used to fall under this too. It is hard for some guys to lie. And partly because they're just like, I'm not a huge fluff bullshit guy. Like you and I have talked to John. He's just pretty straightforward human being. So Kevin Durant clearly could just have a conversation and just wants to talk, not like all the BS that goes on in the world that 99% of people beat around. Some people can't do that. In John's job, you have to do it. There's no way around it, and it's a struggle for him. It is. Part of why Kevin Durant used to fight with Ethan was it was hard for him. Like, guys, stop asking me about free agency because I can't keep lying about it. I don't want to lie about it.
Right. But I don't want to. But I know what you're going to do with the real answer, and we can't have that either.
You're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Yeah. That's why some people just do. The only solution is do not talk at all. But, the NBA, you got to talk 7 times. And the GMs, I guess you could just skip the combine, but you got to go to work. And ultimately, John doesn't want to dodge anybody, Lynch. He wants to just, let's have a conversation. But I agree. I mean, the idea that
you think Kyle and LaFleur are a little justified in McVay? The Belichick, you see, also skipped the combine? First time in his career?
Justified because Bill did it? Does it make it more okay for them? Yes.
I would say it made it look a little better for them.
As Brad tweeted, Lynch touch his ear.
Because wouldn't you say one of the most famous memes in the history of memes or GIFs on would be the Belichick
chewing on something and using the binoculars? Yeah, absolutely. Fred Warner went on Bussin' with the Boys, John, and many people have picked up on a couple of things he said, but one was about, well, I guess, was it Bussin' with the Boys just with Luan?
Busting with the boy, yeah.
Yeah, Bussin' with the Boy. And Luan, and we love to source guess, so we can source guess here. Luan said he talked to somebody in the NFL who knows the game. So, not like a assistant analytic GM, knows the game. And basically told him that Brock Purdy ain't all that, misses throws, etc. Fred Warner said, no, man, that's incorrect. This guy's a baller. I've been a Brock guy since day one when he was just the scout team quarterback. So what do we make of it? And can we source guess who told Taylor Lewan that?
If I had to source guess, as someone who's, I would say the last month I've listened to some Bussin' with the Boys, is Rand Carthen, who is the new general manager of Tennessee, cut him. Now, Taylor was not your typical.
In the room. Was in the room.
Yeah. He knew he was getting cut for a long period of time. So that longtime Titan could have spent all day in the facility or half a day BSing with the guys, talking shop. He was at Ziegler's house within the last month because they have a strong relationship.
Dave Ziegler,
guidance
GM
counselor.
Of the Raiders. Swore wouldn't talk Raiders. Here we are.
Who did the Raiders play? Second to last game of the season.
49ers.
GMs watch the other team typically to just look at stuff. I think that one would make the most sense.
Can I give you one more source guess?
Yeah.
Luan went to Michigan, where 49ers quarterback coach Brian Griese played quarterback. Very different time. Doesn't feel like something Griese would say. But
when would they have sat down next to each other, though?
Did he say they sat down next to each other?
Yeah, he's like, he showed me film.
Oh, showed me film. Yeah, Griese's not on my list, but I just, in the interest of covering all connections, I'm throwing Griese out. Rand Carthen was with the Niners. I mean, Rand Carthen would have a very thorough view.
I'm going Rand or Ziegler.
Yeah, to me, the difference between Rand and Ziegler would be Ziegler might be more likely to show film because Ziegler would have the film. I don't know why Rand would have a bunch of Brock Purdy film on him. Doesn't matter to him. He watched him practice, right?
Well, if you were BSing with him in his office with the Titans and you brought up the question, like, is Purdy legit? And I could be anybody. If I don't think he is, and I've watched him, I'd go, look at this, bring up game, whatever. Look at these missed throws. I know exactly where they are if I'm Rand. Or if I'm Ziegler, I've watched the previous couple games that week checking out our opponent.
Yeah.
Right? Because I end up watching their free agents. Hell, as an evaluator, what did I miss on this Purdy guy? Am I wrong or am I right?
One thing, clearly Luan loves Tennessee, has a special place. He said on one of his podcasts he would not go back and play in the division to play against the Titans. So he could have said to Rand Carthen, Rand, are you going to trade for Trey Lance? And Rand says, they still think Trey could be their guy. Brock's not as good as you think. We're just source guessing, source takes here. The real story of that is not who the source is. The real story of it, though, is how much do we believe Fred Warner's answer was real and how much of it was just, I'm his teammate. Fred doesn't just say, I like the guy. Fred says, I've liked the guy since we started practice against him. I thought it was a pretty authentic, believable, real answer from Fred Warner on Brock Purdy.
I'd agree. I mean, he was the most outspoken guy from the jump because he had the most experience with him, right? Going up against him literally kind of mono for mono. One guy's calling the defense, the other guy's calling the offense. So he believes in him. I think at this point in time, I hold Fred to pretty high regard when not just throwing around stuff when he speaks about another player. And I'd also say he got his back from the beginning when I know most of us people on the outside were like, wait, the seventh rounder, they're fucked. How are they going to make the playoffs? How are they going to keep winning games? He was more than proven right. I mean, the guy was, relative to what they were playing with in Jimmy Garoppolo, he was an upgrade.
Yeah.
It was because I would say Fred pounded the table for him more than anybody immediately. And it had a unique perspective, right? It wasn't like Fred, we see him around the locker room. We don't practice with him as much, Kittle or Debo. Fred was like, I see this guy every single day for the last 3 months in practice, in training camp, all through whatever week that was, 8 or 10 or whatever. This guy can play.
I think it's important to give some perspective too, because we've seen Fred Warner practice. Maybe, and if you've gone to Niner practice, fans, you've seen him too. Fred Warner gets in fights. Fred Warner talks. Do you remember early in the offseason, talked a lot of trash. Like Fred Warner competes. Fred Warner does not go cruise control when they go 11 on 11 in 49ers practice, right? So I think it probably matters to him who else competes. He is trying, I think, consciously to challenge other players, to challenge Brandon Ayuk, to challenge whoever, not just physically, but mentally. And so I think part of the deal with Fred Warner is, well, who is challenging me? My guess is Brock challenged him a little bit, or at least showed him that he couldn't trick Brock, right? In maybe the way that, or maybe punk Brock, whatever it is. Brock passed some test with Fred, because I think it's one thing is clear with Fred is he tries to put people to the test in practice. And Brock obviously passed his test.
Well, Fred has famously said before games, someone asked him, like, why do you look across the field? He said, I try to find the quarterback and play a staring contest with him during the national anthem. And if I can't find him, I try to find one of their better offensive players. And if that guy moves his eyes after a while, I think I get an advantage. You know, he's kind of
And Dunphy?
I would say he's less outspoken than like Ray Lewis, but he's kind of got some Ray Lewis vibes to him. Like when you go to practice, or when you just kind of hear his mindset about football. And I think this gets back to going after Brady or what they're going to do. It's the difference between rumors. I mean, we're going to get some tangible evidence. Like, do they sign a guy, the 15th, 16th, a backup quarterback? Their mindset on it, because I do think not only do they value what he thinks, I think he's reiterating things that like Kyle believes, right? Because you would say him and Kyle are very, they parallel each other, I think, in football stuff.
Yeah.
That I would say he represents internally, and not always players represent the front office. I think it's fair to say like his words represent the powers that be on this young man. It's all going to come down to his health, but if it comes down early next week, like we think everything's going to be fine. Well, obviously no more than 3 months if he's ready to kind of start throwing, but we feel good about everything this doctor said, who's done a million of these. I think they're going to believe in this guy. Now, you still need to get a veteran quarterback, but I guess ultimately what I'm saying is I think he speaks for the powers that be. Not like those aren't their words, but I think he represents internally the mindset, represents other players, represents like what the front office thinks. They're very impressed with this guy, and rightfully so. He earned you in the NFL. You have to earn it. Like ultimately, Taylor Lewan's highly thought of, not because he was a top 15 pick, because then he became a really good player. Really good player. Like McCaffrey doesn't have respect all around the league because he was highly picked or got paid. It's because when you play him and he's healthy, he's a fucking ass kicker. And people that played against Purdy or practiced against him or watched him. That's the other thing. We watched him. It's like, God, this guy's pretty good, man.
Yep.
Franchise quarterback, all that. Who knows? Already been injured, which is obviously never good. Like one time, I mean, you get an injury. I would say too, like, think about this. Mahomes had a couple weird injuries over his career, like high ankle sprain, that dislocated knee, but he never really misses time. So you never view him like this guy doesn't really get hurt.
Right.
When you get a major injury, shoulder, knee, elbow, it's just one of those things that, like, I just do think we look at you. I know for a fact front offices, it's always kind of the elephant in the room. Like Fred Warner, he's not an injury, never gets hurt. He goes down sometimes, but he always gets up. I think it's Purdy. He's going to have to prove, he can just, whenever he gets playing again, that he can just be like Cousins. Even Dak, like Dak's broke his ankle, but for the most part, like when the Cowboys play, Dak plays. Had some weird injuries, but I don't think we view him as an injury-prone guy. Cousins is durable. Durability at quarterback is really, really. Herbert, just Chargers are playing, Herbert's playing, right? There's not even a question.
But gets hurt, but
yeah,
doesn't miss time.
Yeah, doesn't miss time.
Yeah, I mean, it got to the point last year where it's like, shouldn't you take him out of games? Part of it is he's, some of these guys. Dak is physically a large person. Justin Herbert's a big person, right? Kirk, Kirk's
bigger than you think, I think.
Is he? The other thing Fred Warner said, and Akash Anavarthan posted the recap of it. Fred Warner gave his top 5 Niners players, and he ranked them this way. Fred Warner himself, number 1. Trent Williams, number 2. Nick Bosa, number 3. Christian McCaffrey, number 4. Deebo Samuel, number 5. Honorable mention to George Kittle. So my first reaction to this was yours, laugh at Fred. for putting himself number one. I don't think it's as crazy as it sounds. If you subtracted one of these players, which one would be the hardest for them to replace? If you took away Debo, you got McCaffrey. If you took away McCaffrey, you got Debo. If you took away Bosa, you lose maybe the guy that you would put number one on this list. But you do have a good pass rush and a good defensive line coach. If you took away Trent, that's devastating, right? Best left tackle in the league. But you do have an offense with skill guys. You try to run the ball. You have your offensive coordinator is one of your weapons, your head coach. There's really, I don't know how you would correct or compensate for losing Fred Warner if you were the 49ers.
Here's the way I would do it if I was making my list. I would go, they're all rookies. It's a draft. How would I rank them on my big board? And I think that Bosa or Trent Williams are just going one. And I think depending on the team, I would, personally have Trent 1, Bosa 2. But if you had Bosa 1, Trent 2, I wouldn't argue. Now, some teams do not value middle linebacker. I think this guy's so good. I think there are just players that Kuechly when he was healthy, Urlacher forever, Ray Lewis. They do it all. They get Bowman and Willis when they were healthy. It was like, wait, this guy can cover. He can get me 20 tackles. He can sack the quarterback. He sets the tone. Like, I would have him 3. Now, you could argue, like if we were doing it from a draft standpoint, if I got a good quarterback and I get George Kittle, like an impact tight end, the second best tight end in the league, like that's some people would have, like they would rather have Travis Kelce or George Kittle over Fred Warner, for the duration of their career. It'd be an argument. I would have Kittle 4, and then I would probably, if I was the 49ers, you could make the argument that Debo, McCaffrey, you could have Debo above McCaffrey. If you were doing it for the league, I do think McCaffrey probably just plug and play more places than Debo. Debo would be my honorable mention. If I was doing it from the league, for the 49ers, he's very unique.
Yeah, he single-handedly, won them games when they were playing with one hand behind their back. So
carried him to the playoffs.
Yeah,
you could flash NFC Championship.
Yeah, I just can't. Like, in a weird way, Debo's almost become underrated because McCaffrey does some of his stuff, and he's hurt and this and that and the other. But
McCaffrey had the Debo run in the playoff game.
Totally.
Like, damn, didn't know he had that in the bag.
Yeah, like now each one makes the other. Like he's kind of makes him a little. You can overcome Debo not being available or nicked up or whatever because of McCaffrey. But I do think what's interesting is, like, we've gone from Fred. Fred had a year where it felt like, what's wrong with Fred Warner? And there's, to your point, a lot of conversation about it.
It was like 10. It was like 10 games.
He is back from that though,
because it wasn't part of it. Like, how do I ever live up to this money? Wasn't that a big thing that came out?
I don't know. I think it was about play. Like, I think people felt like he was not playing well.
Well, but I'm saying he said that it was, the contract weighed on him. There are other variables as a human being. Yeah, that it affected him. And by the end of the season in the playoffs, it was like, Jesus Christ, this is, the BYU Ray Lewis. I have no problem going. Personally, I'd go Trent, Bosa. Bosa's incredible, and he could have like 3 defensive players of the year and 3 straight. He's not going to go away. I do think it's harder to find star left tackles than pass rushers. Like, it's kind of proven these last, there are just more pass rushers coming in the league than like legit left tackles. Like what the 49ers did to go from Joe Staley to Trent Williams is almost like the likelihood of going from Favre to Rodgers. Like, it's unheard of. Usually don't go back-to-back good left tackles. It just doesn't happen. There's usually a gap.
Yeah. Trent Williams missed the Week 18 game against the Rams a couple of years ago, and Debo won them that football game. Could they have won that game if Trent played but Debo didn't?
Yeah, on an individual, we're doing an individual game basis. Like, there's an individual, like, you could beat Tiger Woods on a hole, Yeah,
okay. Now that McCaffrey's here, it makes it complicated. But my point is,
if Kyle Shanahan had to get rid of one, he would keep Trent Williams over Debo Samuel.
Yeah, but pre-McCaffrey, I'm not sure if that would have been the right decision. Now you have McCaffrey, you could afford to do that. But pre-McCaffrey, I don't I know Trent is viewed as, some call him the best player in the league, non-quarterback. But
the first ballot Hall of Famer is Debo. I mean, he's got a ways to go.
No, he's not. But I watch them play and I go, this guy has done things for them that are irreplaceable. Partly because of their quarterback play, partly because of, actually, largely because of their quarterback play.
Yeah. His value, in a weird way, they weren't as dependent on him, though he was awesome with Purdy still. But I think you saw Kittle, like the teams that have a top 12 quarterback, you put Kittle on their team, he's immediately a superstar. He dominated. What did he have? Like 7 touchdowns and 5, he was an unstoppable force.
Yeah.
And then when you factor in he's a total package, I would have Kittle, and then I would probably have McCaffrey over Debo. And again, I fucking love Debo. He's one of my favorite players of all time. Because I think he's so unique. But that's a pretty special list.
It is.
I think Ayuk could be a year away from just knocking on the door of the list. Like, hey guys, remember me?
Yeah, I mean, I love Ayuk, but there are just things Debo does that he doesn't do.
100%, he can't do. But there are things that he can do that Debo.
That's true.
Debo ain't running every route in the route tree.
That's true. But let's see. Is Ayuk going to become does he become a downfield, like a true downfield threat? Probably not.
Kyle's like, do you see that play I called for him against the Eagles?
Yeah, over routes are cool. I mean, just keep running those. Those are fine. They are what they are. I think it's fair.
I'm talking about the bomb when Purdy got hurt. Wasn't it like a deep post?
God, I don't want to watch that play again. John, we talked the other day about Robbie Gould being gone. So I thought, let's break down the kicker draft. Kind of kidding, but kind of not. I texted an SEC special teams coach that we know. I said, who should the Niners draft? And he said, there's 3 guys: Jake Moody from Michigan, Chad Ryland from Maryland, and Christopher Dunn from NC State. And I just want to give you some insight as to what we're looking for, what the Niners are looking for. All these guys are 5-year guys. What are they looking for when they try to replace Robbie Gould? If they try to replace Robbie Gould, who knows? Maybe Robbie doesn't find what he wants on the market and ends up a Niner again. But a couple things to note. Robbie Gould last year was one of the worst kickers in the NFL in touchbacks. 26th in the league. Not his thing. I mentioned this the other day. Like, one area where you could upgrade, you might downgrade it. He's a perfect playoff kicker. But one way for the Niners to get better at kick coverage where they've struggled is to have less kick returns. And, in the NFL last year, about half the time teams returned to kick against Robbie Gould. Now, college is a little different. So one thing the Niners will need to do is they will watch the tape of these guys kicking off, because in college, you can get a non-return, a touchback on a fair catch. You can fair catch the ball at the 5, and that is a touchback. But on balls that go through the end zone,
because you can give yourself up, basically.
You can give yourself up, and it's the same as a touchback. But even when you remove fair catches,
Jake like something the Hightowers guy would have done, and they would just
100%. You would have counted on guys doing that if you were the Niners. But Jake Moody at Michigan did not have a lot of returns. He was 20% of the time they returned the ball on him. Now, some of those are fair catches. 10 of those were fair catches. But even when you remove the fair catches, there was still a ton of balls that he kicked through the end zone. Ryland, not as many. And the guy from NC State did not kick off for them. So to me, like, the Niners might eliminate the guy from NC State, Christopher Dunn, even though he was second in college football in accuracy. He was 97%, second in accuracy. But he was not kicking off for NC State, and NC State didn't have a great kickoff guy to begin with. So I do wonder if that would eliminate him from the 49ers. NC State's kickoff guy was not great. So now maybe if we use that to eliminate, we go to the Maryland kicker and Moody. Well, here's another thing about Moody. If we're trying to figure out his kickoff times, PFF had him 3rd in hang time on kickoff. So he's got a good leg.
Yeah.
But he was 83% on field goals last year. The other guy, Christopher Dunn, I mentioned, was 97%. Why the difference? Well, Moody kicked more 50-yarders, and he was 2 of 6 from 50+. If you remove the 50-yarders, he was a 93% kicker. Not that Dunn didn't. In fact, Ryland, the Maryland kicker, had 2 50-yarders against Michigan. Like, one thing I like about some of these guys, give me a Big Ten kicker who's kicked in front of 100,000 people. If we're trying to figure out guys who can do postseason kicking, and they kick in bad weather. The one thing about college football, you don't really kick after November outdoors, right? Your championship games are indoors. Your postseason games are indoors. So you don't really get December kicking for any of these guys, which complicates it a little bit.
Well, I'd say, you've been calling college football games for almost a decade. How often do you see a coach pull the trigger on a 50-plus yard field goal? It's not like the NFL, right?
Yeah, not as much, no. But it's not Robbie.
Rare.
Robbie only kicked 3 times 50 yards or more, and he made all 3, but he only did it 3 times near the bottom of the league.
I would say that they lean like that's probably right about his range. I don't know. It's kind of dependent on how well your offense is playing, but like the Tuckers, the McManuses, I would say Carlson with the Raiders, you're 53 yards and it's 4th and 5. It's an easy decision, right? Sometimes when you're kicker in college, it's a no-brainer. Usually like, screw it, let's just go for it, right?
Yeah.
Or if we're in a defensive game, we punt. The one thing I would say, and this is what you do as a scout, the NC State kid who didn't kick off, and like you said, you need to immediately talk to the special teams coach and ask him why. You ask the kid his thoughts on it. And if you are interested in the guy, you work him out and you have him do kickoffs and you chart him and you see what it is. Like, does he have the leg strength? Is it something that, he pulled a hammy a couple years ago and he just stopped doing it and they just let the other guy go. And he was so valuable to their team because they've been pretty good the last couple of years.
Yeah.
They have been a competitive team. Maybe they viewed him as a weapon. You need to do a deep dive on that. I mean, it feels like Moody, once you brought up his picture, he's pretty famous. Now, you and I watch a lot of Michigan games, the mustache, but he's just also pretty good.
Yeah.
I also think the hard thing guy, and this gets back to the Florida State kid years ago, Aguayo, it's Alex Henry at Nebraska. A lot of times a guy that gets drafted, in the 3rd to 5th round, it's usually like, he's one of the all-time great, whatever. He's an all-time high percentage. It doesn't really translate because most of the guys, when you think about it, like the guy was kicking at Florida State. The guy we drafted, Alex Henry, to replace Akers, Nebraska. You're usually not drafting a guy like from New Mexico or, I think pretty sure Tucker's Texas. Most of the big kickers that are getting picked,
Robbie's
Seabass,
Penn
Florida
State.
Yeah, they're coming from the Power 5. So it's not like you're nitpicking like, he kicked at North Dakota State. Typically, they're at the biggest programs. I just think it doesn't really translate. You have to do more like, is the guy wired the right way? I think there's an element of luck. I mean, I would say it's one of the luckier positions. I think punting, for the most part, you're a good punter. It's more transferable. This one's a little bit more like, I think you just think more. Maybe punter's just more reaction.
Yeah.
This is just, if you told me that there was another guy that's an undrafted free agent, like one of the better kickers, like Washington or Texas Tech, or if he makes it, that happens all the fucking time in kicking.
Yep.
Because if these were linebackers, you'd be like, 2 or 3 of them are going to be 8-year starters, right?
Well, that's why to me, one of the important characteristics would be the kickoff element, leg strength. Right? That is more like punting than field goal kicking is. Would you agree with that? It's more just a physical trait that in theory should translate. Do you kick it out of the end zone?
Here's the other thing, and this is what makes it also hard. I just look because I thought it was true. Obviously, Tucker, is undrafted. Robbie Gould was undrafted too. And Robbie Gould's going to have a 20-year career. Tucker going to have a long career.
In all likelihood, Jake Moody's not going undrafted, right? You're not getting that guy undrafted.
No, probably not. So it just shows you that it is the right decision because you have to make financial decisions in football the better your team gets. But Brandon McManus, undrafted. I mean, the most famous kickers currently in the league, undrafted free agents. And what do you think? McManus, Tucker, and Gould, when we look back in 10 years, I mean, they're going to combine for 40 years in the NFL? No, more than that. 50 years in the NFL? All undrafted. And if you could redo all their draft, like Justin Tucker's probably going like the 2nd round.
Yeah.
McManus probably getting drafted in the 3rd. Gould,
You could argue the price you have to overpay relative to how much better a 4th-round kicker is than an undrafted kicker. There may be no real difference between the two of them. The only difference would be one of them probably was more productive, more famous. But there's only going to be 2 or 3 guys that like really feel like you know what you're getting. And so that guy's going to get overdrafted.
One difference I think it puts on, if you're able to land just a top 10 kicker as an undrafted free agent, in a weird way, there's less pressure on the guy. Now, there's pressure on individual kicks. If I draft a guy in the 4th round, I tweeted this out the moment Robbie said his statement. It's like, get ready. Every training camp kick matters.
Yeah.
I think as an undrafted free agent, it still kind of does. But if I told you they trade up, they use one of their 3rd-round picks on a kicker. That kicker is getting talked about. Well, I mean, not quite like the quarterbacks, but not a lot different than the other rookies.
Wisnowski was a 4th-round pick. And that was a dramatic pick when they made a 4th-round pick. Pick 110. I mean, these are starting linebackers and guards that you're not drafting, right?
Difference too, though, 100%. Punters do, like, no one's charting the punts. Did he make the field goal or did he miss? And we have seen, we see it every year of like, this is not going well. He's shanking
preseason.
Aguayo's the best example of that.
I think the challenge for the Niners will be, we've seen when they like a player, they just take them. And if you don't have Robbie Gould on your roster, can you afford to just wait until the draft is over to take a guy you like? My guess is they would take a guy they like too high, then wait and let somebody else take that player. If it got to free agency, I'd feel fine about their ability for a kicker would want to kick for them.
100%. They're drafting a guy because they did it with the punter and it worked, right?
Yeah.
Worked in the sense where he's their punter. He's their punter for a long time.
Yeah.
So they'll go, we have no problem. And they are right. You would always, because like I just said, all those names, they would all get drafted if people knew how good they were going to be, right? But I just think kicker, you could argue it's the biggest variance in the league. Because like with quarterbacks in the 1st round, you're either going to be good or you're going to suck. There's not like Kirk Cousins, Dak Prescott's do not come from the 1st round. So all these quarterbacks that are being talked about in this upcoming draft, let's say 5 of them go in the top 20. You're either going to be a high-end player or you're going to stink, Like Mac Jones is like an outlier. And even he started trending towards stinking.
Well, it's so hard to do a study because these guys never get drafted. Last year, 1 kicker. The year before, 1 kicker. The year before, 3 kickers. The year before, 1 kicker. 2 kickers. 2 kickers, 2 kickers, 3 kickers, 1 kicker, 2 kickers. Aguayo's year, he was the only guy drafted.
Well, from an economic standpoint, just if you look at the draft in a vacuum, you don't draft the starting kicker. You draft a punter. I would say punters historically get drafted because like they're much more plug and play. Kickers, would you be better off just signing the 2 best undrafted free agents, have them battle it out? Hard to do that, but
Cade York, the Browns, he was the only kicker drafted last year, John. They took him in the 4th round out of LSU. Man, he played some big-time football. He was 75% field goals last year. That's not good.
No. Remember who was pretty good 2 years ago was hit all the field goals in the playoffs was the Bengals kicker.
Evan McPherson.
Yeah. Drafted.
5th
round.
Yeah. Patriots took a 5th rounder the year before. Justin Rohrwasser. He's still
on the team.
Daniel Carlson, a 5th rounder. Jake Elliott, a 5th rounder.
But Carlson's a good example. Got drafted in the 5th round, did not make the team. The Raiders, I think, claimed him or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, there's our kicker breakdown. The pot of the kickers. Later, y'all. Thanks for hanging.